What's up, guys? Welcome to Box to Box Football, and I'm back here with Jack. And guys, we just want to get into a debate that, to me, is becoming like the Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard debate. And this is another between Chelsea and Liverpool fans. It's Trent Alexander-Arnold versus the Reece James debate. They've been going back and forward week in and week out. Someone might get a goal, might get an assist, whatever, a screamer from here, a free kick from there. It's just been going off week in and week out. And I think we have to like get into this debate right now and just pick who would we rather have, Reece James or Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, Jack, before we start right now,
Yeah.
these guys have been phenomenal this season. I know you have a few stats that like you want to bring up. Could you please bring them up?
Before we just kind of get into it, I think, again, just because we're comparing right backs does not mean you're comparing apples to apples. It does not work that way. We can talk about somebody like Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and we can talk about his qualities as a right back, best defensive right back in the world. But we're not going to compare Aaron Wan-Bissaka to somebody like Dani Alves from however many years ago. You know, it's two completely different players. You'd say they each have their merits, but kind of comparing one to another in a certain category or style of play doesn't really make any sense, because a lot of these guys obviously play very different styles. And I do think that Reece James and Trent Alexander-Arnold both do play different styles and contribute differently to their team. So I think the first one that kind of sticks out to me, James, really is if you look at kind of like, you know, passing types, for example, like dead ball situations, that's Trent's ballpark. You know, he will take free kicks. He will take corners. He can offer that kind of delivery. I think there are certain passes and certain assists that Trent Alexander-Arnold can make that somebody like Reece James can't make. However, we look at the kind of attacking output, especially over the last couple of games from somebody like Reece James in terms of goals, shots on target, and also the venom in which he's scoring and the conviction with which he's scoring, which is why he has more goals than somebody like Trent this year. But yeah, like I say, I'm not going to get overly into the kind of nitty gritty. You know, the shot creating actions. Trent Alexander-Arnold nearly doubles Reece James. Trent Alexander-Arnold with 54. Reece James with 27. A shot creating action is actions leading to a shot, so a pass, a dribble, drawing a foul, something of that nature. So what I'm trying to get across, and I know I've been rambling for a long time now. What I'm trying to get across is that these are two different players. So this is not a case of one is better, just it doesn't matter about the other guy. It's all about where you put them, which team they play for. For example, do we think Reece James plays better football at Liverpool Football Club or at Chelsea Football Club? I think he suits what Chelsea have going on right now. If Trent goes to Chelsea, do we think Trent is better than how he is at Liverpool? I would say that where they are, which teams they're playing for, suits who they are as players. So realistically, if I'm a Liverpool manager and a Liverpool fan, or just that's the team I'm picking for, I'm picking Trent. If I'm a Chelsea guy, I'm picking Reece James because of the setup in which he plays in. But this is a bigger conversation.
Yeah, this is okay, Jack. This is a bigger conversation than that. I look at it from this point of view right now. Trent Alexander-Arnold is perhaps the best set piece or dead ball specialist type crossing fullback in the world. His ability, and people will say João Cancelo. Yes, João Cancelo is definitely up there. Yeah. I know Jack is eulogizing about his ability to play these outside of the foot passes, but Trent's ability to pick out players like Salah, Mane from deep in his own half, from cutbacks or from like wide areas, from like corners and free kicks, whatever, is absolutely outstanding. Him as an actual like crossing fullback, amazing. But I look at different types of attributes of being a fullback, like 1v1, being able to beat your player. I think Reece James is better at doing that than Trent Alexander-Arnold. You look at goal scoring right now, I would have said, oh wow, first of all, it's weird to look at fullbacks and just mention goals, because that's not meant to be what fullbacks do.
So James,
but you know,
I actually have a perfect thing just to back you up there. So dribbles, right, this year, Reece James and Trent Alexander in the Premier League have both attempted 12 dribbles. Reece James was successful in 8 of those. Trent was only successful in 6 of those. Touches in the attacking penalty area. Reece James has 32. Trent Alexander-Arnold has 25. So to kind of illustrate your point there, yeah, there is that greater attacking threat, the onus on Reece James to do that kind of thing, whereas maybe that's not required so much from Trent.
Yeah, but you mentioned all that sort of stuff there. Yes, they're part of fullbacks, and they both do it at a high clip. Now, Reece James to me came out of nowhere going forward. Chelsea fans may be like to me like, oh no, he's always able to do that, but he and Ben Chilwell have been Chelsea's most feared attacking force this season. Even
Marcus Alonso's played well too.
Like Marcus Alonso, but even Callum Hudson-Odoi in like especially the game against Juventus, the fact that like those two can just play out wide in like be so threatening for Chelsea has been a big difference. But the one thing that for me may separate both of them, Trent and Reece, is defensively. I look at Reece James and I believe that Reece James is a better defender overall as a fullback than Trent Alexander-Arnold. We've seen what happened last season. We've seen what happened with Gareth Southgate. And like we know how much Southgate values the fact that he wants a defender who has the ability to defend at a high standard. Now, the one thing with Trent Alexander-Arnold is that as great as he is going forward, they've always been a question of him going back. And Jack, I know you're giving me a face right now that you're going to bring up some stats that don't really favor me in that situation. But
I just think it's interesting. I think you bring up an interesting point. So I'll tell you this. So, for example, number of players tackled total, you might be surprised to hear that Trent has made 3 more tackles than Reece James, 13 and 16 respectively. But like James, just as an example, you mentioned defensively, if you're a fullback, where do you do your defending? You do that in the middle third, the attacking third, or your own defensive third? You do that in your own defensive third. Your own defensive third tackles, Reece James has 9. Trent Alexander-Arnold only has 5. So it just shows you that in those more defensive areas, whereas the majority of Trent Alexander-Arnold's tackles are being made in that middle third where they're trying to counter press, right? They're trying to nick the ball back and then play a quick pass down the channel to a Salah or across the pitch to a Mane. So again, it's because realistically, they're very, very similar. And Trent actually has Reece James beat in a lot of those defensive statistics. But as you're mentioning, do we want a defensive fullback who does really well in the middle third and the attacking third, or do we want a guy who's actually going to defend the goal? Because I would say I'd rather have my tackles, if I'm a defender, in my own third than in the middle third. But again, it all depends on style of play.
Now, Jack, let's take it a little bit further. Let's take it to England. Who would be the starting fullback for England? Now, England are not a team like a Chelsea, like a Liverpool who play on the front foot against better opposition. They're willing to sit back and take a bit of pressure. Now, who would you rather in this in that situation play for England, Jack?
Well, first of all, it's a fascinating conversation. And just like I said, I didn't really want to go down kind of a rabbit hole of stats just to bore people. The one that sticks out like a sore thumb just defensively, Trent has 27 interceptions. Reece James has 5. So that I just think that's one of that's one of the standouts. But again, it's style of play. It's got not necessarily anything to do with ability. The difficulty, James, is I believe that at their best, Trent Alexander-Arnold is a better player than Reece James. I do. I would hold Trent in better value at his best. But here's the problem. Is Trent at his best week in, week out? You're always going to get a 7 or 8 out of 10 minimum from Trent. I don't think that's the case. I don't. And I think that as we go forward here, we're going to see way more consistency from somebody like Reece James than we are from Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, if I'm playing international tournaments, I don't want to risk a guy coming in who might have a stinker one game and just, not be quite at it with his deliveries and, his decision-making maybe. So I would probably go for Reece James going forward. But what I would want to do maybe is try and find a way to put these guys in the same team. We know how stacked England are at the right back position. England have the best right backs in the whole world. Like, I don't even know if it's close. to me, I think if England are going to continue to do the 3 centre-backs thing, there's got to be a way that as and when Kyle Walker slowly starts to fade out his international career, that right centre-back spot gets opened up to one of these guys. I would say probably Reece James is best going forward, but Trent as a right centre-back or even push him into the midfield positions might be worth considering.
Is Trent in the midfield position? No, I don't want to see that. But Jack, the one thing that I get here is that going forward right now, I think Trent is better. But being a fullback is not just what you do going forward. For Liverpool, Trent, outstanding. We see what he does. But being a fullback, there's 2 types of the game, going forward and also going backwards. I'm going to give you a great example. Dani Alves, arguably the greatest right back we've ever seen, going forward, immense. But the one thing people never really talk about with Dani Alves is his ability to defend going backwards, also defend 1v1 against talented wingers.
Mm-hmm.
For 10 years, Dani Alves had to defend against Cristiano Ronaldo and done it at a high standard. And I look at someone like Trent. I don't believe him going against some of the best wingers in the world right now that he would be able to go toe-to-toe, stand toe-to-toe with them defensively. And that's my biggest issue. I look at someone like Reece James. Going forward is brilliant, but also going backwards, I think he's a much, much, much better defender than Alexander-Arnold. Personally, I think he also fits Gareth Southgate's mold as a fullback more than a Trent would overall. Personally,
he's more athletic. He's more athletic too, James. And yes, you know, let's be honest. As much as we want to, wax poetically about the technical sides of the game, we know that that's not really England's bag. We'd love for the Phil Fodens of the world and the Emil Smith Rowes of the world and these kind of guys to come in and have a much more technically based England team, but I don't know if that's ever going to be in our DNA. Realistically, what England have is a bunch of incredible athletes on the field across the board most of the time. And I think that you can always fall back on the fact that if you miss that first tackle, like we've seen with Kyle Walker, you can run back and you can make a recovery.
Now, we're going to end it here, but we know where we stand. Chelsea fans, we know where you stand. Liverpool fans, we know where you stand. Now, we're looking for people in the middle right now.
Yes.
Right? Who would you rather have? Yeah?
Good point. James makes a really good point here. I tried to say this earlier. Chelsea fans, you've got the right guy. Liverpool fans, you've got the right guy. But guys who don't support either team, that's who we want to hear from.
Who would you rather have? England fans, who would you rather have that fits England more? Trent or Reece James? Let us know. Comments down below. This is Box to Box Football. Like, share, and subscribe. And we will see you next time.